Brian Wilson, Mary Catherine Ham, Brian Neiman, today's newsmakers, and you, the Morning Majority.
8:37 on WMAL. Brian Neiman, Mary Catherine Ham here in D.C. Brian Wilson's down in Florida for the big primary today in the Sunshine State. Larry Kudlow joins us now, host of the Kudlow Report on CNBC at 7 p.m. You can also hear him on the radio. Larry Kudlow radio show Saturday nights at 7 o'clock here on WMAL. Good morning, Larry.
Good morning.
So there's talk in this town that the Democrats in the Senate will introduce a Buffett rule coming up. They want to make sure that everybody is paying their fair share, whatever that number is, 30% or 35%. I guess the question is it even possible to come up? Because everyone always talks about simplifying the tax code. I mean, I even hear that from Democrats. Is it possible to insert a Buffett rule without making the tax code more complicated?
No, of course not. I mean, it's like a third tax system. You have the income tax system, you'll have the alternative minimum tax system, and now you'll have the alternative millionaires minimum tax system. It's insanity. What we need is pro-growth tax reform. It's real simple. Take out the deductions and broaden the base and lower the marginal tax rates and promote something called economic growth. That's what they need to do. And by the way, the Buffett tax is really an attack on the capital gains tax. But let us not forget that the capital gains tax is a double tax on corporate profits. That dollar has already been taxed at 35%. So if you tax it at 15%, that's about a 45% combined tax rate when you actually work through the after-tax impacts. If you jack that up to 30%, it would run you, over 50%. So let's be sure that what we're doing, we're double taxing corporate profits by going after millionaires with this class warfare. It is anti-growth and anti-investment, and we will get fewer jobs out of this exercise.
Is that the plan, just to jack the capital gains up to 30% to prevent millionaires?
I don't know specifically, Mary Catherine, what it is. That's one option. I've read some things that they want to put in a whole system, a whole new system, and in place of something. I don't know what that means. I mean, this president, he's had a couple of years now where everyone in town, there's a building consensus on both sides of the aisle to go with the Simpson-Bowles tax reform plan in some form or another. Not everything, but in some form or another. And the concept is to get rid of all the deductions, exemptions, and loopholes for upper-income taxpayers that don't need it, in my opinion, and lower the rates. Make it simple, make it clean, and provide some growth incentives so if it pays more after tax to invest and take risks, then you will do so. I mean, it's a pretty standard supply-side idea. And it's out there. I mean, there's so many people. You got a lot of Democrats in favor of this. I interviewed Democrats, guys from Colorado, my favorites, like Bennett and Udall, guys talking about that. But this president is stubborn, and he insists on his populist ideology. And, no, it's not going to go anywhere. You know that, and I know that. It's not going anywhere.
But so it's this silly game that we get into this time of year and this season when there's an election underway. We don't really care whether anything's going to be accomplished. We only want the issue. We don't care whether we really accomplish anything.
Well, you mean you want the election year politics?
That's right.
Issue.
We want the issue. That's right.
And it is silly. I mean, here's something else that's very silly. The president devoted about 16 seconds in his State of the Union speech to cutting spending, getting the deficit down, and stopping the record-breaking debt. And I have a warning to Republicans on this, too, because I don't think last year's debt ceiling debate or super committee did the Republicans any good at all. And I had Senator Tom Coburn on last night talking about this very topic. And I know that Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin is talking about this. It's so important for the GOP to make a push, go back to their Tea Party roots, and slash spending, work on the deficit, and get the debt down. The debt now exceeds GDP on a gross-to-gross basis. These are things that have to be done to preserve the economy.
I was going to ask you that because, I hear a lot about, that we're being taxed too much. But if you had the current tax code the way it is now, and if you cut spending, if you just brought the spending down, would that help out the economy? Or would...
Sure would. It sure would because, as Milton Friedman taught us many, many years ago, the true gross tax position is probably best signified by the volume of spending as a share of the economy, spending as a share of GDP. And if you lower that spending as a share of GDP, you'll reduce or release resources run by the public sector. You'll release them into the private sector. And that will give the private sector essentially more money to run this engine of ours, which we sometimes call free market capitalism.
So would it be better for Republicans if they just said, hey, you know what, the tax code, the way it is now, maybe not change, everybody wants it to be, easier to understand and simplify the tax code. But would it be better if they just went on the thing and say, you know what, taxes are what they are right now? These are pretty much the same rates they were during the Bush administration, correct?
Well, that's correct, although, let's not forget, in January 2013,
they're set to go up.
All the Bush tax
right.
cuts expire, right. and also in January 2013, the Obamacare taxes begin to kick in.
Okay.
So, no, I think you proceed in two tracks. You have spending reform and tax reform. You have budget committees and appropriation committees, and you have the tax writing committees, Senate Finance and House Ways and Means. I mean, you've gotten... Let's see, David Camp in the House is close, I think, to getting a corporate tax reform for which there is broad-based support right now, although not in the White House. And the President's Jobs Council, at least in a general way, once again re-proposed corporate tax reform, again, to lower the rates, broaden the base, get rid of unnecessary deductions, to make the USA competitive. We're not competitive. We have a very high rate compared with the rest of the world. That makes it tougher to do business here. These are all things that should proceed at the same time.
Larry, Florida's a tricky place to talk about our biggest problem, which is entitlements. What do you think of what you've heard on the ground there? And I was surprised there wasn't much in the debates about it.
Me too. It's funny, Mary Catherine, you're so smart. We talked about this last night.
I'm going to replay that on O'Reilly when I go on next week. Listen to this, Bill.
You're so smart because this is one of the things that there are two things that are bugging me right now. One is that Congress is not taking up spending and tax reform. The other is that with all the name-calling in this Republican primary in Florida, really we didn't hear much in the debates about clear spending reduction. I mean, we heard lunar colonies aren't a good idea. We don't have enough money to build Levitowns on the moon. Okay, we got that.
Right.
But we didn't hear a broad-based spending cut debate, let's say between Gingrich and Romney or Santorum, Gingrich and Romney. We didn't hear a broad-based entitlement debate. We heard finger-pointing that you were once for a mandate or you were once for a mandate and I was never for a mandate. But we didn't really hear how to reform Medicare, for example, or how to reform Social Security, and that's really most regrettable. Those are Tea Party issues that aren't really coming out in these debates, and I think the Tea Party is demoralized, and as a result, I fear it's going to be much less of a factor in these elections because the political leaders are not carrying the ball on this. They're not really addressing these key points.
All right, Larry. Good to talk as always. Thanks very much for your time. We appreciate it.
Okay.